Speaker, we all know that Iran has committed brutal human rights violations. This regime silences dissent and suppresses the truth. And those who dare to speak out face severe consequences, including death. 1 year ago, 22-year-old Mahsa Amini was murdered by the Iranian regime, the so-called morality police, while in police custody. Iran's morality police had detained her for a false crime unthinkable to most of us here in this chamber. The crime, failing to properly cover her hair. The people of Iran were outraged by her brutal murder and by the range of injustices that the Ayatollah subjects Iranians to, day in and day out. This outrage led the brave people of Iran to rise up in peaceful protest, demanding change. Sadly, but not surprisingly, the regime responded with a violent crackdown against the protesters. They detained tens of thousands of their own citizens and killed hundreds of more. The regime choked off access to the outside world by blocking the internet. Disturbingly, violence and isolation is how they deny their own people their freedom and their voice. The international community has failed the people of Iran by failing to compel their oppressors to stop this abuse. We have many sanctioned laws designed to address Iran's regime's human rights violations. However, it is clear that many officials and institutions in Iran have not yet been sanctioned for their role in these abuses. That is why it is so important that we pass this bipartisan bill that was authored and introduced by Representative Banks from Indiana. We must require the president to formally determine whether specific high-ranking regime officials and institutions meet the criteria for imposition of our sanctions and then act based on those determinations. The Biden administration has its own political agenda when it comes to Iran. This administration wants to broker a bad nuclear agreement with Iran and has made it clear that it is willing to sacrifice leverage in the form of sanctions enforcement to do so. My long-standing concerns only grew when we learned that the administration's chief negotiator, Rob Malley, was being investigated for problems with his security clearance. This administration must be transparent about these allegations and how they have impacted the last 2 years of Iran's policy. To the administration, I say this: we must not sell out the Iranian people to reach a bad nuclear deal with Iran. A nuclear Iran is simply not acceptable. We must fully enforce the laws on the books that we have in order to stop the grotesque human rights violations taking place in Iran. And that is why, as we approach the 1-year anniversary of Mahsa Amini's tragic death, and it is so fitting that we do it here in this chamber this week, the Congress must show the world that we have not forgotten her, Mahsa, or the millions of Iranians who have experienced violence, oppression, and even death at the hands of the regime. So I urge unanimous consent for this measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.